Hello, Rotarians and guests. Welcome to Sync Lab Studios and the Rotary Club of Park Cities weekly meeting. I am Barb Jeffries, President of the Rotary Club of Park Cities. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to Sync Lab Studios and the Rotary Club of Park Cities weekly meeting. If you're a guest watching today, I encourage you to go to our club's website, www.parkcitiesrotary.org. You can learn all about our club and our service opportunities and see a list of upcoming Friday speakers. We'd love to have you contact us if you also share our mission, which is service above self. We're interested in becoming a member. We are now going to be joined by Nolan Duck, who will lead us in our invocation and Pledge of Allegiance, and then the national anthem. Before we do that, though, I'd like for you to keep in mind our friend and club vice president, Jeff McNaughton. He has a joy he'd like to share with you this week. While he was tested positive for COVID, he feels as though it is a joy that he has not had his symptoms have not been very serious. It was a couple weeks ago. He feels much better this week than he did last week. So he is on the road to recovery. After Nolan, we'll have Happy Franklin tell us about marketplace advertisers, followed by Mark Kasher, the team chair for the marketplace advertising group this year. He wants to tell you a little bit about the program.
So join me in prayer.
Okay. Mark, I'm hearing myself.
Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the opportunity to be together in Rotary. Lord, this is an odd time and an odd situation, but we're grateful that you are allowing us to communicate and to be with each other. Lord, I ask that you'd bless each and every member of the Rotary Club of Park Cities. And Father, that you would help us to continue to serve others, even when we find ourselves distanced from each other. Thank you for all that you're doing in each of our lives. Help us to recognize the blessings that you've given us. Thank you, Lord, for the time that we can share together. In Jesus' name, amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The PCR Marketplace advertiser this week is Oldham Lumber Company and Lynn Searle, CEO. Oldham has been in Dallas since 1921, so Oldham is celebrating their 99th year in business this year. Oldham Lumber Company serves national restaurant chains as they expand throughout the U.S., including Raising Cane's in Texas, Louisiana, Nebraska, Arkansas, and Oklahoma, Hooters in Colorado, New Jersey, Louisiana, and Texas, and all the Texas Whataburgers. Oldham is also a supplier to production home builders and custom home builders. Oldham supplied concrete forming material for some notable jobs in the Metroplex, such as the DFW Airport Terminal D, American Airlines Center, AT&T Stadium, and the new Ford Center at the Star, the Cowboys practice facility. Lynn joined this club in 1989. He is a Paul Harris Fellow and a Frank Monroe Fellow. Homeowners, tell your contractor you want the best. Get the material from Oldham. Let's give a round of applause to Lynn Searles for sponsoring today's PCR Marketplace ad.
Thanks, President Barb. I'm here to tell you about our hub advertisers, and we have some spots available for anyone that would like to advertise their business within the club. It's a great way to support the club, get some exposure on the back of the hub, and we're thinking of some great, exciting new ways to get exposure for your business inside of the club and the meetings as well. And it's a great way to support our own Rotary Club as well and our budget. So if you have any questions or if you have any interest, we do have some spaces that are available. Happy to talk to you about that. Feel free to give me a call or email me anytime.
Welcome back to the studio. Before we hear from our guest speaker today, I would like to share with you just a few short announcements. The first is encouraging all members to sign up for our volunteer opportunities. As you know, there are 36 different ways that you can volunteer for service projects in our community and in our club. Go to our website, www.parkcitiesrotary.org, and under the Info tab is a link to choose your 2020-21 teams here.
The four-way test.
So if you get that done, that would be great. Next thing, the last couple of weeks you've heard from both our own RCPC Foundation, Kyle Marmillion telling you a little bit about that, and Greg Pape talking about the Rotary International Foundation. As we start this new year, I encourage you to make both of those donations. So much good is happening right now as a result of the monies that are made available through those foundations, and thank you all for that. As you know, we have wonderful speakers. We are so proud, and such an amazing team works on those, led by Jeff Sheehan and Susan Harris. If you have ideas for speakers that you would like to join us in the studio and that our members and our guests would enjoy hearing from, please contact Jeff Sheehan. Lastly, if you have any joys or concerns, you can either contact myself or Mary Bishop, and we'll be sure and mention it during the invocation the following week. So speaking of our speakers, next week we have Victor Vescovo. He is a retired naval officer, a deep sea explorer. He has been climbing the highest peaks of the 7 continents of the world, and he is also exploring the depths of the oceans. D Magazine in February, he was the cover of that magazine and was listed as the most interesting man in Dallas. So please join us next week when Cleve Clinton is here to talk with Victor. Following that, August 14th is one of our favorite meetings of the year. It's when we get to hear from our new members. We have quite a few who are anxious to introduce themselves to the club and so that you have an opportunity to hear about them. And when we start meeting again in person, we'll get to meet them. Okay, at this point, I am going to turn the program over to Janie Loveless, who is here to introduce today's speaker.
And the clicker. Thank you. I don't know how you hold this. Okay, Mary Pat. He's got her on the screen, so you can sit down.
Hang on. Sorry.
Barb, can I borrow your pad? Do you need this? Uh-oh, I didn't mean to click that. It is such an honor today to introduce Mary Pat Higgins, the President and CEO of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. Later, when we get a date that's safe enough, she'll guide us on a tour through the museum, and we'll have details of the date and the way to do reservations on our website. So I know everybody will want to do that. Mary Pat has been the president CEO since January of 2013, and she brought expertise of finance and education and nonprofit experience, so she's a real asset to the museum and to us. She took a trip in 2014 with a small group to Europe to try to figure out from museums and concentration camps what we should be using and doing at the museum and what we should not be doing. And Florence Shapiro, who's a Paul Harris Fellow, and many of you may remember she spoke to our club. She's a former Texas senator, and she's actually a classmate of mine from Hillcrest. She says that Mary Pat was the catalyst and the driver for the museum, and without her leadership, we would never have had it. So we are so blessed for that. And she now leads a staff of 52 people, although 20 have been furloughed because of the virus. And they have done such a phenomenal job with a new building and the broader scope of adding human rights to the Holocaust original purpose. And so we are just so blessed. And I'm told that she has created a family. She's kind of like a mother hen, according to Florence. And she takes great pride in her employees and their successes. So the museum started in 1984. But before I talk about that, I want to give some other descriptions of her from some of her colleagues. They say she loves life, she loves laughter, she loves playing games, and she especially loves a good spreadsheet. And they say she is so much fun. So imagine her bowling with colleagues, and 16 summers ago, she was actually marrying the librarian in the musical The Music Man. So she has a very interesting background, and she's also very competitive. And like me, she wants to win, so if we ever get in a Monopoly match, it'll be a nightmare. So back to the museum after 1984 and its founding. In 1994, they celebrated the 10th anniversary of the museum. And at that point, the Dallas Morning News published an editorial quoting Mike Jacobs, who's one of the co-founders of the museum. And he said, the museum was created to remind future generations of what can happen when prejudice gets out of control. Who could have imagined, 36 years later, how much we need that message and those lessons? So also in 1994, with the 10th anniversary, Schindler's List was released, and thank goodness that movie really raised awareness of the Holocaust. And today, there's a fabulous new film called Resistance. I hope you have a chance to see it. It's wonderful. It talks about our history and how heroes like Marcel Marceau actually helped save people during the Holocaust. So that's just a blessing of something recent that hopefully will help us share lessons of the Holocaust. So in the meantime, I hope that we can not only learn from the museum about human rights as well as the Holocaust, but in this climate of so much unrest and divisiveness and intolerance, issues like racism and immigration and just the protests and all the incivility of our world and our nation and our area, we need the lessons of the Holocaust more than ever. And the museum, with the broader scope of human rights, is just phenomenal. I can't wait for us to take a tour and see the museum. It is just amazing. So, without further ado, I just want to mention that we all need to remember the warnings of never again and history repeats itself, because the museum will help us remember that and share the lessons. Mary Pat?
My goodness, Janie, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I need to be careful and not let you talk to people, not let people that are introducing me talk to any of my friends at the museum. May I borrow that clicker? Thank you. It is an honor to be with you all. I was telling Janie and Barb that I have done this presentation before, but I have never done it virtually, and I've never done it in a studio, so this is really a fun experience. Thank you so much for telling them so much about the museum. I really appreciate it. Florence, I'm sure you know that Florence Shapiro was on site, part of the program when we opened in 1984, because she was the mayor of Plano and she was the dignitary. So it was pretty wonderful to have her involved as we were opening the new museum, that her parents had the vision for. So this is a picture of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. We opened on September 18th, 2019, and sadly, because of COVID, we had to close just 6 months later. So currently, we are not open to the public, but we hope to be open to the public soon. We have made a lot of changes to the exhibitionary experience to make sure that visitors will be safe, that you can social distance, and if people come through and wear their mask, then we know that our visitors and our employees will be safe. So we're anxious to get open because the most important way we accomplish our mission is through a visit to our museum. The mission of the museum is to teach the history of the Holocaust and advance human rights to combat prejudice, hatred, and indifference. And we are doing that as we're closed virtually. I'd invite you to go to our website, dhhrm.org. That's the initials of the museum. And look at the program tab. There are all kinds of programs that you can participate in on a weekly basis from the safety of your home. And we'll continue to do those programs through the end of the year virtually. And really, we're thinking that we may continue moving forward because we've had people from all over the country, all over North Texas, participate in the programs. And so we want to continue to reach as many people as possible, but we'd love to have people in our home. You can see on the screen is a picture of our student entrance. All of us who are involved in the museum are passionate about the opportunity to have an impact on the students in our community. They are the leaders of tomorrow. And we want to get as many 6th through 12th graders as possible coming to our museum. The Honorable Florence Shapiro is leading an effort that we call the Museum Experience Fund to raise money to ensure that all Title I schools are able to send their students to the museum. So it waives their admission fee and it reimburses the school for their transportation. So it's very, very important. We hope to have 80 to 100,000 students 6th through 12th grade in our museum once we can reopen. And in the fall, we'll be doing virtual field trips for them. So here you can see students that were in our museum. I want you to look at the red banner in the background. This is the way you start our exhibitionary experience. It's the definition of an upstander, someone who stands up for other people and their rights, combats injustice, inequality, or unfairness, sees something wrong, and works to make it right. As you go through our exhibit, we will hold up examples of upstanders throughout the history of the Holocaust and throughout the history of our own country, and raise them up as shining examples of people that work to promote change. You start with an orientation theater, and it's a short film, about 4 minutes long. We ask you a series of questions. Why is the Holocaust still relevant? What are the basic human rights? Why should I get involved? And what difference can I make anyway? And then doors open and you are drawn into a room with a stairwell, and as you go up those stairs from the 1st to the 3rd floor, we introduce you to the history of the Jewish people and to the history of anti-Semitism. Before we enter the Holocaust wing, we want you to have a grounding of this incredibly rich history of the Jewish people, but also know that anti-Semitism is the world's oldest hatred, and that is what made the Holocaust possible. You enter on the 3rd floor into Nazi Germany. We have throughout this exhibition large artistic installations. This is a giant book that is meant to make you think about Hitler's writings in Mein Kampf, and you can read some of his writings and see how out in the open his goals for the annihilation of the Jewish people were. As you walk through the experience, you'll see there's information on reading rails. We've designed it for people, for different levels of readers. Our museum designers told us that there are skimmers, swimmers, and deep divers. So the skimmers might just read the big quote and look at some pictures and the explanations of those pictures. The deep divers want that extra content on the reading rail. So there's something for everyone here. There are 9 original films throughout this exhibition that are just really phenomenal. So you need to pace yourself. You could spend hours just in the Holocaust wing. One thing I wanted to be sure and highlight were these FaceTime stations. I know you all, or many of you, had the opportunity to listen to Max Glauben give his testimony years ago. We thought it was so important for our visitors to hear this history directly from our survivors that we put 17 small iPads throughout the Holocaust wing. Each one has 4 short video clips of their testimony. You may not be able to see, but the top one in this picture is Max Glauben when he was quite a bit younger. Florence's parents are both both give their video testimony as well. This is a great way to really think about the impact that the Holocaust had on individuals, because often we lose the sense of the personal impact. 6 million is such a huge number, but when you think about what this meant to families, it really can make a difference. We, again, have beautiful artistic installations. We teach you through maps. We have our anchor artifact, the boxcar that was in our very first museum in 1984. It came from Belgium and was used in World War II. And you can walk inside that boxcar and listen to testimony of survivors and get a sense of what it might have been like to be in that car for a week to 2 weeks in some cases with no food or water. It's really remarkable that a man could do that, to his brother. And you end in the Holocaust exhibition in Liberation, New Homes, New Lives. We want you to be introduced to our local survivors who managed to reclaim their lives, who came to Dallas and made a life for themselves and their family and contributed to our community. And their families are still active in our community today. We think this is an incredibly important lesson for students because, we want them to understand that you can go through something as horrific as the Holocaust and still have a future if you work hard and you try hard. Then we transition into the human rights wing. So in the wake of the Holocaust, it was the first time that there was representational justice. The world came together, really led by Harry Truman, to say we must try these war criminals. We must prove that this happened because people will deny this. And there were millions of documents that gave evidence that the Holocaust happened. Luckily, that evidence is there, but people are still denying the Holocaust today. The next part of that wing is the creation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Eleanor Roosevelt chaired that committee, and they came up with 30 universal rights that all humans should enjoy, and every member of the UN signed on to that statement. And I love this quote from Eleanor Roosevelt that you can all see. We have to look at home before we can try to tell others about their human rights violations. And what's interesting about the UDHR, the initials of the Universal Declaration, is that we really didn't act on it until the 1970s because we had segregation here at home. We had legal discrimination. And so it took the civil rights movement happening and leaders like Elie Wiesel, who is an incredible Holocaust survivor, who started speaking up about the importance of human rights for our nation and the world to start focusing on those rights. The next part of the exhibit is a gallery that teaches our visitors about the process of genocide. We use a metric that was created by Dr. Gregory Stanton, who formed Genocide Watch. It's a nonprofit. You can go to the website and look at learn more about these stages. But Dr. Stanton was in the State Department, and he went to Rwanda and Cambodia in the wake of their genocides and studied them and realized that every genocide follows a pattern or a process. So you can see these stages starting with classification and moving through denial. For each one of the stages, we highlight another historic genocide. We also remind our visitors what that stage was in the Holocaust to reinforce that learning so they can be aware of 10 historic genocides. Sadly, there's so many more than that, but we wanted them to at least have some concrete knowledge about those and to really be knowledgeable about the stages, because then we can better speak up when we are worried about letting another genocide occur, when we're reading in the paper about the plight of the Uyghurs in China. You know, we can be aware that we are in that process and that it's our responsibility to speak up. This room is very different. We use these giant artistic installations, and we also created graphic novels. If you have teenagers or grandkids that are teenagers, you've probably seen them reading what looks like a comic book, but it's very serious subject matter. John Lewis, who just passed away, wrote a graphic novel called March that is fantastic. If your kids don't have that, I would really highly recommend it. But it's a way to make this content accessible to youth, you know, in a way that they're very comfortable with, and it teaches this history and the stage so concisely. And then we pivot to America. We wanted to end our exhibit focusing on the importance of civil and human rights in our own country. Really, I think maybe my favorite part of the exhibition is the short film that these three hosts that you're seeing talk to you about our country and our founding ideals. You know, we were founded on these incredible ideals that all men are created equal. But the reality is we have not treated all men or women as equal uniformly. And it has taken incredible upstanders to work through the democratic process to bring that about. And, you know, as Janie said, we see ourselves in a new civil rights movement and a new push to really live up to those American ideals. As you enter this gallery, there are three main things that happen. There's a Texas upstander wall where you learn about heroic and impressive people in Texas. We want students to really be proud of our state and look up to these leaders. There are these kiosks in the middle. You can see over to the left, this sort of these blue round islands. Each one has 5 touchscreen monitors, and on those you can learn about the evolution of rights for these 12 groups of citizens. We give you about 25 events that start before our country's founding and end with today, and they give you a sense of the arc of progress. They highlight people who worked for change, and they highlight issues that are still with us today. I mentioned the Texas Upstander Wall. You can listen to their testimony just the way you could our survivors in the Holocaust wing. There's an exhibition on the other side of the room about the Piccadilly Cafeteria, which was the big civil rights protest in Dallas in 1964. Charles Broadnax was the first African-American hairdresser in Dallas, and he was the first African-American hairdresser at Neiman's in downtown Dallas, and he walked across the street to the Piccadilly Cafeteria for lunch, and they refused him service. And he and Juanita Craft, who was a civil rights leader in Dallas, led a protest for 30 days. And ultimately, the Piccadilly Cafeteria changed their policies and were open to all. And that was supported by Dallas leaders, that protest and the change, and really was a great moment in time for Dallas moving forward. Then there are 2 more experiences that happen before the wonderful last part of this exhibition. There's a Beyond Tolerance Theater. The host that greeted us in the Orientation Theater and that greeted us as we entered the Pivot to America wing teach us about the concept of implicit or unconscious bias. I'm sure you're hearing a lot about that in the discussions about race today. The snap judgments and decisions we make about people without even realizing we're doing it. It's just human nature. It's nothing to feel guilty about, but it's something that we need to be aware of so we can change our decision-making process, and not rely on that knee-jerk, gut instinct. Really use facts rather than emotion to make our decisions. So there are interactive touchscreen iPads in this room. The host asks you a series of questions, and the system tabulates the answers so you can see how those that are with you are tabulating. I brought through my cousins. I have 12 cousins on one side, and it was really fun to kind of go through and see what people's answers were and have that experience together. So it's a fun thing to do as a family, and very important. And then lastly, there is a call to action. We want this visit to really have an impact on your attitudes and behavior. We want to inspire our visitors to become upstanders. That doesn't have to mean saving lives or putting your life at risk. It starts with volunteerism. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir with Rotarians because I know how important volunteerism is to you, but most people in our community are not getting out and volunteering and thinking about others. And so we challenge them to sign up to volunteer before they leave the exhibit. This is another touchscreen interactive where we present 100 nonprofits that have agreed to work with us throughout North Texas and beyond. And you can send their volunteer coordinator an email before you leave the museum, and they will follow up and try to get you into their fold and get you engaged. And then lastly, really one of the most important areas of this third floor, this permanent exhibition, is the memorial and reflection room. This is where we honor and remember the loved ones of our local survivors and second and third generation who were murdered during the Holocaust. There are plaques on the wall of those family members. We've been speaking about Florence. So her father's family and her mother's family are honored and remembered in this room. And it's a place for reflection, for you to sit and think before you go back into the rest of the museum, before you go back into your daily lives, to think about what this history means and what your responsibility is based on this history. There's a wonderful experience on the second floor, so if you come on your own, don't forget to do this. It's called Dimensions and Testimony. You can have another chance to learn from our wonderful Max Globin. It is as close as you can get to a holographic experience. The Shoah Foundation, that was founded by Steven Spielberg when he filmed Schindler's List that Janie spoke about, started recording survivor testimony 25 years ago. Well, in the last 10 years, they realized that we were soon not going to have the opportunity to interact with Holocaust survivors and learn from them on a person-to-person basis. And so they started this project. They have filmed 20 survivors from all over the world. One is Max Globin locally. One would have been the sister-in-law of Anne Frank. Her name is Ava Schloss. Her mother survived and married Otto Frank. One was in the women's orchestra at Auschwitz-Birkenau. It's just, there's an incredibly rich depth of history that has been preserved by the Shoah Foundation filming these survivors, asking them over 1,000 questions. And then in this small theater, we present it thanks to incredible technology in a way that looks like the survivor is sitting on the stage. You are able to ask that image a question, and using voice activation technology, the computer finds the answer and plays the video of the survivor answering that question. So it's really a pretty remarkable experience. We're only one of 2 museums that have this holographic Dimensions and Testimony Theater. The other is in Skokie, Illinois. And it is something that you should not miss when you come to the museum. We have a beautiful library and archive. If there's anyone listening who happen to have parents or grandparents who were liberators, or survivors, and you have letters or belongings or photographs, we have a beautiful climate-controlled archive where we can preserve those artifacts and make them available for learnings for generations to come. And then I wanted to say just a quick word about our virtual programs before we end with some time for questions. We are accomplishing our mission until we can reopen through our virtual programs. We have some really wonderful ongoing series, Upstander Speaker Series, Civil Discourse Series. We have just started a series called Crucial Conversations, Race and Racism in Our Community. The first session in that series was last Thursday, and it was a conversation between me and a really wonderful woman whose name is Camila Collins. She is an equity, diversity, and inclusion consultant. She's been in that field for 20 years, and she's so knowledgeable about issues of race and systemic racism. And she had worked with our staff and with our board to really think about how to be more open and equitable in our museum staff. And she also helped us with the content of that Beyond Tolerance implicit bias experience. So she and I had a conversation. Moving forward, you can see there are 3 more series. The next one will talk about the past. We'll focus on the history of racism in Dallas and North Texas. Then we'll move to the present. We'll look at issues that still are happening today, but also at progress that's happening today. You know, it's pretty incredible that we have an African-American mayor, police chief, the head of the Citizens Council is African-American, the city manager is African-American, the chair of the Dallas Regional Chamber is African-American. There's so many positive and wonderful things that are happening, but we still have a lot of work to do. And the last part of that series will be the future. We will hold up some really great organizations working to be a part of this solution in our community and challenging everyone that's on this journey with us to get engaged and to be a part of that solution. So again, you can find information about all of those virtual programs on our website, dhhrm.org. We also we recorded that series last week, the first session, and that's on our YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and search DHHRM or the full name of the museum, that comes up and you can watch that first session. So I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to share a little bit about the museum with you today. We are so proud that we were able to open this beautiful museum. We cannot wait until we can reopen and allow visitors to start coming, and I'm hopeful that that will be pretty soon. We have taken every step to make sure that a visit will be safe, and I would love to see you all at the museum once we do open, and I look forward to the chance to give a guided tour to your group. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
We can't wait to take the tour, and we thank you so much for being here today. We've looked forward to this for a long time. And speaking of survivors, when the museum opened in 1984, there were 125 in this area. Now there are only 40, which makes the testimony so important. And you also have speakers that come in live, I think, periodically, as well as the recorded testimony. And people can, I guess, make reservations for that. So that is just phenomenal.
One thing, Janie, I'll just jump in. We have a summer survivor speaker series, and once a week one of our survivors is coming into the museum, and they're safe because no one's there, but we're filming them giving their testimony, and you can find that on the program tab of our website. It's really important to hear this evidence because our oldest survivor is 103. Max, who you all have met and love, is 92. We won't have them with us for much longer.
Exactly. Well, and I used to take students when I taught at SMU to hear the survivors, and the man that I mentioned being quoted in the editorial back in 1994, Mike Jacobs, used to talk about watching the Nazis throw babies out of upstairs windows. Yeah. He lost 40 survivors during the Holocaust. I mean, he lost 40 members of his family, excuse me. And Florence, who's the immediate past chairman of the board for the museum, lost 38 members of her family. It's just inconceivable.
It is.
So So we are just grateful for all you've done and for the chance to tour. That's just going to be so
Oh, I
exciting.
can't wait. It'll be fun.
So I know there are more questions, but I thought I'd ask you a couple.
Sure.
What are you the most proud of, personally as well as at the museum?
Well, my babies. I personally, it would be my 2 boys who are living in Japan and Chicago. I have no idea when I'll get to see them again, but I am proud of them. And then my other baby is this new museum. As Florence said, I am a bit of a mother hen, so I feel like I was pregnant for 7 years with the museum and finally had it. Now I'm not able to show off my baby to anyone, but we will be again soon. But it's, that was an effort that was led by incredible volunteers, and we had hundreds of donors who gave generously to support it. So it really was a community effort. And what's interesting is I think people hear Holocaust and Human Rights Museum and think, oh, this is a Jewish organization. A third of our money was given outside the Jewish community, and you saw the content, is rooted in the history of the Holocaust but moves forward. So it's, hopefully as we are open longer, people will realize that this really is a resource for all of Dallas, and hopefully people will join and become members and help support us.
Well, and you all are teaching parents and students and leaders and educators,
Right.
about the past and the history as well as what's going on today, which is just so important. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you, speaking of volunteering, is how can our club and other Rotary clubs best help you?
Thank you so much for asking that. First and foremost, come visit. Tell your friends. We want to have as many people as possible come and experience this museum. You'll see that there's so much content that you can come back time and time again. So when you have visitors come from out of town, you can bring them back and not be bored. Always philanthropic support is important. You can become a member for a pretty modest price, and that's really important for that ongoing operating support. But we also really need incredible volunteers. One of the most rewarding volunteer opportunities I can think of is becoming a docent. If you love kids, if you love history, if you just love being with people, you can go through our docent training program. It's led by one of our, we have 2 PhDs on our staff that taught college-level courses. They're incredible, and so they run our docent training. And our docents are so devoted to the museum, and they're really subject matter experts when they finish that training. And they help make sure that the students who come through our museum are getting all of the messages that we want them to take away. The exhibition is incredible, but without the docents, we're not reaching some of those students. And so that is a huge need for us.
And that would be so rewarding for us to do that. That's great.
Yeah.
Couple of questions that I wondered about. How does the legacy of John Lewis kind of dovetail with the museum? It's so incredible that 36 years later, we need this more than ever, and he's such an example.
Absolutely. So John Lewis is definitely, an American hero, and he is one of the upstanders that we highlight. He and Martin Luther King and all the men and women who really led the civil rights movement back in the 1950s and 60s. And so we celebrate them and we hold them up as examples in that Pivot to America gallery. And we hope that people will be inspired by learning what they did to take action today. History is so important if we learn from it. We want to teach history so it impacts behavior today. And we definitely celebrate and teach about John Lewis and all of the incredible leaders of the first round of the civil rights movement.
Exactly. Thank you so much. We can't wait for the tour.
Thank you.
And we want to honor you for speaking with us by giving you a book donated to Preston Hall Elementary, my old alma mater, just to thank you so much for all you've done. And we're going to close the meeting after we have Happy do the 4-way test. And again, we can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
The 4-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
So we're going to close the meeting. Thank you all for being here and watching, and share this video with your friends. It'll be on our website. Thank you.